Hello everybody, Jay Marino here. Welcome back. It's been a while since I have done a custom Melee showcase, so we are back. If you recall, user Solstice has created 2 custom races. One, well, used to be named Xayid, now it is Xayid, just renamed slightly there. In the bottom left, we have Solstice playing as the red Xayid, and in the upper right, we have Trumpet playing as the blue Genetron. So as this game gets started, I will re-review these races. Also, a lot has changed, both visually and mechanically for both of these, so we can kind of get into it. So, again, Solstice has created both of these. He's been hard at work. I will put a link to the Discord for these. They're called Scion Custom Races. That way you can kind of keep up with the production of these two, the creation of these two, any updates, and then find partners to play with as custom games. So we'll keep the production tab open and try to keep an eye out for how these races work. So let's start with Xayid down here. I like the look of the scavengers. This has certainly changed since the last time I've seen Xayid. Again, they used to be called Xayid, or I was just pronouncing it incorrectly, but now it is Xayid. So building the Xayid Den, that's like his tier 1 building. Xayid looks very insecty, looks a lot like Zerg, but functions similar to Terran in a way. Both of these races are quite unique, and I really like how they distinguish themselves both from each other and also the 3 vanilla races. So to keep an eye out here, the feeding pool, for example, is the supply structure, but also provides an aura. Looks like something was added here. Nearby owned production spawn rate by 5%, can stack up to 4 times. Also, can heal kind of like Moonwell's. Not as drastic as Moonwell's, just sort of a passive healing rate, and you got a little range on it now. I don't think that used to exist. And you can see the production structures each individually have their own larva. So he's getting his first Xayidling out, which is just sort of like a little marine for Xayid, rather. And both players taking early expansions. Let's take a look at Genetron real quick to see what's happening here. So early production here is the manufacturer and getting out a Spitfire. Again, both of these are just tier 1 ranged units. And I really like the robotic picture here. Both of these, I think, are really reflective of what they're meant to be, which is very insecty for the Xayid race and just completely robotic and automated for Genetron. And I also really like the manufacturer and the way that you can see whatever's being built down here. Like this was the mercenary compound, but it's now the production structure. Outfitting station here for basic upgrades. Processing node is the supply structure for Genetron. Passively provides energy regeneration to the closest town hall. Closest town hall you can use to transfer that energy to other units. Yes, increased energy generation for closest supply structures. And then mining priority, so this is a different macro mechanic. Increases the resource yield by owned nearby harvesters. So you just have to hit that, and you just get a boost in income. But nothing super drastic. 11 seconds increased resources by 1. I think that would be really effective for gas specifically. So anyway, let's take a look and see what both of these players are planning on doing. Got a repulsor going up, basic defensive structure for Genetron. Again, both players having their expansions out, and we do have +1 light weaponry coming out for Trumpet in the upper left. Meanwhile, we've got a roamer out for Solstice. The last time I've watched Xayid be played, roamers were very popular because they're light, easy to build, cheap ranged units, and they're very good at scouting. So he uses the Scour ability, which gives him a small bit of vision. So if we look at his vision, all he saw there was that little circle that was given to him. So it's like a mini scan that you use from the roamer. So obviously you have to get kind of close, but you can obviously use the terrain to your advantage to give yourself some vision. Now, the next thing here that we want to take a look at here are these uploaders. This mechanic is how you tech up with Genetron. So for example, you can only build certain buildings based on the number of the certain units rather out of a building based on how many uploaders are attached to that production structure. So for example, we can only get certain upgrades from the uploaders based on how many are connected to the manufacturer, and maybe this Blaze might need 3. As you can see here, the Aquila needs 3 linked uploaders. Now, you can build as many uploaders as you need per production structure, or you can transfer the uploaders that you have currently to connect to different ones as well. So now we've got some Spitfires looking like he wants to move across the map. The roamer is still here to provide some basic vision. Again, I don't see tons of roamers. It looks like Xayidligs are the name of the game. What do we have here? Dash, I do recall Xayidligs having. Gives him a little buff and a nice little movement. Little movement mechanic, and then a reviler here, if I remember correctly. The more that these attack, the faster that they attack. Though that looks to be an upgrade to grab here. Yeah, they can attack up to 5 times at stacks, getting a 30% attack speed bonus, but they have to continuously attack. Looks like Trumpet, they're using the Spitfires to take out that roamer. again, it's nice to see a game. It's been a while since I've checked these games, but I remember Xayid, a strategy seemed to be just mass roamers, which is almost the equivalent of like mass reapers, for example. They're very fragile, but can be very powerful in the right situations. But it doesn't look like that is the case here. We have several things coming up for both players, but most importantly, Trumpet is moving across the map here with 8 Spitfires, and we can see what damage he's going to do with these. Again, these are similar. These are kind of like beefy Marines up against Xayidlings, which again are also similar to Marines in the sense that they're tier 1 range units, but they have this dash and can have other upgrades as well that can help them out. Extra range, can attack air, and then extra damage versus armored. Both of these are considered light units. I don't believe either does particularly well against lighter armored in a specific fashion until those Xayidlings get upgraded. Trumpet looking around for a third base. He's going to find it. Going to roll on in there and start picking these off. I was going to say these Spitfires seem a bit slow. There's the dash in action, just trying to get on top of these. I suppose he felt confident to be able to take these out. Trumpet just moving away. Looks like he has finished the upgrade, the calibrated engine so that he can move away a bit faster, deciding to leave. Though he did have a bit of an advantage. More Xayidlings coming out from Solstice being forced up by those Spitfires. Meanwhile, trying to take a look at what both of these players are in the process of making. We have now Blitzers coming out. This is like the tier 1.5 ranged unit from Genetron. And again, they have a nice typical ranged attack. They attack kind of slow, but most importantly, they have the Supercharge, which has a 10-second cooldown, but when you activate it, it doubles the attack damage that the Blitzer can shoot, which is very important, and you have to use that constantly. Spitfire's coming back in. You can see the feeding pools in action here. You got 2 of them stacked up. It's a pretty noticeable aura. Trumpet just rolling on in here. These Spitfires are pretty fast. He's trying to pick up what he can, but he's getting trapped here by the Xayidlings as well as the Revilers. They don't have that faster attack speed researched yet, but the Spitfire's getting in here, and it looks like he is managing to pick up a good amount of workers. If we take a look at what is units lost, I don't do this often enough. I believe it is, yes, Control R. 14 workers picked off there. Pretty significant. Solstice cleaning that up and deciding he wants to go and attack. We've got some Scorpilisks in here. These are like the tier 1.5 melee units. You want to keep these in the front with the Xayidlings and Revilers in the back, and Roamers, I suppose, in the back. And they're not super beefy, but they do have a base +2 ground carapace. So again, you want those in the front as best you can, and they can get a speed upgrade as well. Both players with their third bases out, and we have a large amount of Blitzers, and then Trumpet also getting a mole out here. These are kind of like siege tanks. They're mobile artillery, but you have to burrow them in order to activate their attack. So here he goes, burrowing that into the ground. Does a significant amount of damage, more versus armored. Again, they're kind of like a single damage siege tank. And it looks like they may be able to do damage if they shoot through things, and you can see both players now coming in head-on. We've got the Blitzers, rather, doing what they can. You could saw their barrels glowed red there as they charged up with the Supercharge. You want to use that as often as possible. You can see it only lasts for 4 seconds. We have one Xayidling going ahead and attacking the third base. And Trumpet's defensive Blitzers here getting cleaned up by this small group of Revilers. The Revilers coming in with the Battle Frenzy, though, that increases their effectiveness significantly, especially if you can keep them in the back and don't require them to move and just have them fire away. These will clean up buildings very fast as they stack up that attack speed. One mechanic here is Genetron buildings do not burn down, but they do go into lockdown mode, and when they go below a certain amount of HP, they become inactive until you repair them above a certain threshold. You can see the Blitzers activating their Supercharged cannons there. They only stay buffed for 4 seconds, and if they don't shoot within that 4 seconds, then you lose that buff and the cooldown completely. So it's important that you use that at the right time. But if you have a large group of them, you pop it all at once, should work out just fine. Meanwhile, we've got Mech Light Weaponry +2 coming out for Trumpet. In the bottom left, trying to keep an eye out on what's going on here with both these players. They're both completely new tech trees, trying to keep track of it all. Casnalisk Dan, I remember Casnalisks are caster units, but I don't think we see any on the map currently. We could take a look. Any Casnalisks? We do have Eroders. I don't recall what these are, so let's take a look. Enemies which have been attacked by the Eroder will have their weapon damage reduced by 15% for a few seconds. That is a pretty cool buff. All right, let's go back to the production tab. Actually, I'm going to keep the units tab up, and we can take a look at army supply as well. And so we have a very large group of Blitzers coming over, along with a huge amount of mules. He must have pulled out so many mules here. I guess suppose he lost his third base, a lot of his mules. This seems like an all-in type of tech, but I don't believe this game is close to being over, so I would be surprised if this works. I don't remember how long this game was when I opened it, though. If this was a game-ending attack, I would be surprised. We have the Bile Pits getting some free damage as they roll by, as the Blitzers roll by. The Blitzers charge up. Most of them get their attack off. This one might lose it. Not a big deal. Most of them still were able to attack. The Revilers in the front, though, vulnerable, getting picked off. That's important, not having those right in the front. We do have a large amount of Eroders debuffing. And let's see how much damage these individually do. Significant versus armored. The Blitzers are armored, so the Eroders, I have to keep clicking on the units because I don't remember the names. The Eroders are significantly good. Better, I should say, versus the Blitzers here, but I think just the amount of Blitzers plus the amount of mules that were brought in here to repair them is just a little too much for Solstice. Solstice having to back up, though surprising, because again, the Eroders I would suspect would be particularly good. We do have one Fairy in here. This is really just used to transport units, just sort of flying around, not really sure what to do. And we'll see how Solstice can bring this back. Solstice ahead in terms of income if we take a look here. Pretty significant difference there. Huge Harvester difference because Trumpet pulled off so many workers to repair these. And while this is working out for Trumpet, he has to ensure that he takes out several bases with this attack, considering the worker lead that Solstice still has, regardless of losing these bases. So we have to see a major pushback from Solstice, in even just having these Bile Pits here, able to push back against Trumpet. Is going to stop him from able to just roll in. If he were to supercharge these, he could probably snipe these Bile Pits in 1 or 2 volleys, just like that, exactly. Picking off the Fairy in as well. Stopping any possible drop attacks from Solstice behind his back. And now that his attacking force has been whittled away, it looks like Trumpet's going to start backing up. We still have a large amount of these Eroders. Xayidlings with the Piercing Thrust is going to counter these Blitzers quite well. And we have to see Trumpet retaking his 3rd or even 4th base if he wants to keep up. If we check the income tab again, pretty significant difference here between both of these players. Almost a 50% increase here in mineral income from Solstice. Genetron, though, does have, again, with these Blitzers, he can snipe quite effectively with Supercharge. As long as he doesn't lose this entire army, he wants to get out of there soon. We have a Massalisk here. Don't remember exactly what this does, but it has a lot of HP and seems like it does a lot of damage. It's just like, it has a very short range. It's not technically melee, but once it gets in there, it's able to do a lot of damage. I was going to say, comparable to an Ultralisk in a way. Like, the role, it kind of fits like a Thor Ultralisk, where it's just a heavy sort of frontliner, but not quite exactly the same. Meanwhile, we had some Spitfires rolling in here, trying to pick off what they can. Solstice able to push that back. Looks like he's setting up some Bile Pits to defend himself. And Trumpet keeping the pressure on. I think he realizes he has to keep the pressure on here and dealing what damage he can if he wants to keep up with the income here. The income gap is closing, though. And large amounts of Solstice's army getting picked up because they're streaming in separately. Another Farian going down, and workers getting pulled off. This is the opportunity for Trumpet to kill these. I don't think these workers needed to be pulled. And that's going to close the gap between these two players. If we check the Harvester gap has closed significantly. And Trumpet falling back, I think if Solstice now decides to push back and make a big swell of units, he may be able to push this back. Trumpet fully focused on this battle, not producing anything, though he is relatively low on resources at this moment. The Blitzers able to take out these Eroders, but again, those Eroders are just so good against the Blitzers in particular, but mixed in with the Spitfires makes a pretty good team. We'll see if he begins to tech up separately. He is making just more workers. What do we have coming out? More Eroders. So again, like a tier 1.5, tier 2 major battle between these players, but I think if both players are willing to mix in those tier 1 units, they'll be able to counter each other that much better. Like, the Xayidlings are particularly good against these Blitzers, and you can see the dash being used effectively to pick off a unit and then just immediately backing off, and he can just keep doing that. These Xayidlings, I think, while they are low on HP, do that extra damage versus armored. They are relatively cheap, and while it does seem like the engagement is going in Trumpet's favor, if Solstice were to make, here come more Revilers, I'm going to say, and just more Xayidlings, he likely could push this back, but Trumpet pushing in. Not sure what he's trying to pick off here. He already took out this expansion. Maybe his efforts would be better spent trying to pick off the 3rd. The 4th was destroyed as well, and these Bile Pits able to push back Trumpet. And it is important to utilize that cooldown for the supercharge. If it's up, it's worth popping and trying to get one volley out and then just continue to back up, just because it is a significant amount of extra damage. You're able to do 28 instead of 14. Just the fact that it's double damage, really, you have to decide where and when you want to use that. Very important. So now, again, taking a look at the income tab, it is swung in favor of Trumpet, who looks like he wants to retake this base, but both players constantly producing units and not able to bank enough to retake their 3rd and 4th bases, respectively. All right, so what do we have here? Residual acid. What is that? Causes the Prowler's acid nests to leave behind a puddle of acid when they die. Prowlers, I believe, can lay what are effectively acid mines. It seems like this just allows them to leave behind some residual damage as well. We have a clump of extra workers here. Those could probably sent back out to the expansion or the third base. And let's keep an eye out for what I don't recognize any of these tooltips, so we're just going to click on them and see what they are ourselves. Here's the fabricator. Again, I really like the look of the Genetron production structures. It's one of my favorite things. So we have more moles coming out. Again, these burrow. They do a lot of extra damage. The uploader researching subterranean sensors adds a medium-range radar system to moles, allowing it to see enemy ground units in the fog of war. So they sort of become like mini sensor towers. Now we have some Spitfires. They're very speedy now with those calibrated engines, moving across the map, looking for a possible fifth, I suppose, and rechecking on the fourth. These can just run in and do a lot of focus fire damage. Again, similar to Hellions, but they don't do the splash extra versus light, but you can run in and just, as long as you focus fire, can pick off several workers. Now, it looks like we do have some acid nests here that are going to catch these Spitfires. Boom, just like that. So there's just sort of like spider mines in that way. But you do have to roll pretty much directly over them, and you can see the residual acid right there. Spitfire's coming in. It looks like he's trying to focus fire the individual workers. And then we do have what looks to be, that's the Prowler. Some sort of debuff here. I have to check what that is. Blinding Burst. Blinds all enemies at a medium radius, disabling their vision, attacks, and abilities. So kind of like Blinding Cloud, but also a complete silence for abilities as well. That's very strong. It only lasts 5 seconds, though. And it looks like it only works. It says medium radius, okay, and you have to get pretty close. So you have these Prowlers. They don't have an attack, but they seem like they're very powerful spellcasters. So we have a mix of defensive mines, Xayidlings, and eroders here with some spellcasters from Solstice. Meanwhile, we have Trumpet pushing in with another large group of Blitzers. I keep wondering how he can afford to keep pushing this amount of units out, but again, keep in mind, both of these players, their income is relatively low, and their focus on aggression as opposed to trying to expand. Neither player wanting to go into the late game, it seems. Another large group of Blitzers, but most importantly, 8 moles. These can do huge amounts of damage if they are positioned correctly. And it looks like Solstice getting drawn into this. Solstice just, I think, realizing that he's burrowed and might be able to just circumvent this, but also having to pull back because if these moles get close to his base, they're going to be able to wipe them out quite significantly. The range on the moles is, I don't think, nearly as high as siege tanks, but still, it seems like the burrow time is relatively quick. And this is going to be challenging. He might need some air units to push these back. We'll see. The eroders, if they can't get close enough, same with revilers, but we do have some Prowlers flanking around. Very interesting if he can blind these. There's the blind. You know what? It's a blinding burst. You have to get into melee range to cast it in the first place, but that was an excellent move. Prowler's moving right in, completely disabling the moles as Solstice moves in with the eroders and the Xayidlings, able to just push in and destroy all of them. Now all that's left are the Blitzers, which are going to be countered directly by the eroders. We do have some Casnocelisks out. They used to be called Casnocelisks. Simplified to Casnolisks. Stagnating Bile. Alright, this is another caster unit without a typical attack. Looks like it just has an AoE here, and then Explosive Glob, just sort of an AoE damage dealing unit, and then it can cloak individual units, which is quite interesting. Alright, both players sort of pulling back, licking their wounds, but Solstice coming out on top with the 4th base out currently. And if we just kind of take a look at units lost, Control R. Jabrino's getting back into it. It's going to take him some time. Workers killed. I mean, for this point in the game, it's not exactly even, but it feels relatively even at this point. Isn't there there's a unit? Yeah, the unit's lost. All right, so obviously way more resources lost by Solstice at this point because of the constant aggression by Trumpet. So that gives Trumpet some breathing room to kind of get back on his feet. He's making more moles. I have to say, that engagement where he used the... Okay, we have another engagement here with Blitzers just trying to push this back again. A couple moles, and without those moles being disabled, they're going to be able to provide just so much fire support, able to go down, and we had the Castlist trying to lay down some additional AoE as well. But the Blitzers upgraded at +2, and using that supercharge is able to push this back. What was the unit called? The Prowler. Seeing the Prowler run in and disable that entire group of moles, again, that silence, and I mean, it's a complete silence. You can't attack, can't do anything with units, is insanely strong. But when you think about it, the Prowlers do have to get into melee range, so they are very easy to pick off, but you have to see them. So being able to flank and putting your moles like right down a ramp or something is very dangerous if you can't see that these things are about to just get on top of you and completely disable them. And that was an excellent move. Again, I'm talking about an engagement that happened at this point a couple minutes ago, but that was just excellent. We have a few Xayidlings moving across the map. More just basic +2 upgrades coming out from Solstice, and we do have the +2 attack. Both players looking like they're sending some units out. A larger group from Trumpet, which means that he's not going to have nearly as much of an army at home. Meanwhile, Solstice still having Casnolisks, so he can do some AoE damage. as well as the Xayidlings. Xayidlings, again, don't quite counter Blitzers, but they do have that extra +4 damage versus armored, and you can make a lot of them for cheap. The mole's burrowing in, wanting to stop Trumpet from getting out of his base. And then this mole might get picked off. Looks like okay. Just triggering one of those mines, not quite close enough. Both players likely to have an engagement here, but again, the moles just sitting here waiting to take their shots. And it does look like some of the ones on the front. What is this? What is this radius on the outside here? Is that? I don't think that's the mole attacking range. They do have 13 range now. Okay, yeah, so I think that is their attacking range. Interesting. Okay, because it looks like one is quite small, and oh, you know what? That's their detection range. That's what he can see through the fog of war, keep in mind. So he can see that there are units there, but doesn't know exactly what they are. Once again, moving in and using that supercharge, and just sacrificing one Blitzer to get rid of all the mines, which I think is the smart choice. If you can't see them, you might as well go for them. Are they... Okay, you can destroy them, it's just that they're invisible. Both players now back up to 4 bases. Let's check the income tab. Fairly equal, both on Harvesters and income, and here are the moles doing a lot of damage, but I don't think there's enough here to protect them. Once again, moving in and disabling them and destroying them. So really good counter there by Solstice as Trumpet retreats with the 4 Blitzers that he has left. Checking the production tab, we have more Spitfires coming out. Most importantly, I think Solstice has a bit of a bank. If he spent all this money and pushed right now, I suspect he could probably win, but I suppose he doesn't really know what Trumpet has in the bank. If we take a look, he's not aware of the 4th base.
Mineral field depleted.
Neither player is aware of each other's 4th base at this point in the upper left and bottom right respective corners. All right, and it looks like Solstice possibly going in for the kill here. Let's see if we can eye the Castalisk abilities in action, because I'm sure they've been used, but I just haven't been seeing them because I'm focusing on other things on the screen at the time. But large amount of Xayidlings again, but this amount of Blitzers, plus if he pulls off some Mules to repair, I'm not really sure how this is going to work. We do have some Teslas out. Can launch a shock charge. Nothing else is upgraded to utilize these. Let's see if these shock charges can help out here. I imagine a shock charge is good AoE. 4th base starting to get picked off, and there's the shock charge I see. All right, and they are invulnerable, so Solstice's army is effectively trapped unless he wants to move through the shock charge, which I suspect he does not because the Xayidlings are very weak, and if they roll through those, they will die. Trumpet picking off the reinforcements as well, so we have the army that's split in 2 directions. Trumpet able to get a lot of free kills here as Solstice is rallying down in this direction. And we have more shock charges being built to lay those down. And, ooh, okay, some sort of bomber there from Genetron. It looks like you pick a target, and then it just blasts forward with some speed and lays that down. Again, hard to keep track of all this. One Xayidling in the expansion. Meanwhile, in the bottom left, we have Trumpet attacking with some Spitfires and pulling the mining off the 4th base. Meanwhile, with the possibly final engagement here, and you can see the Tesla charges just absolutely obliterating these units. These are excellent for zoning out weak units specifically. I imagine heavier units don't have to worry as much about these, but you do have to spend resources to build these in the first place. So Trumpet trying to, again, zone his opponent and keeping his army on 2 ramps and not able to engage him completely and get that full concave because he was sort of surrounded here. But using these Teslas to their full advantage here, laying down those shock charges, definitely turned that to his advantage. Straight counter to Xayidlings. And once his units were trapped up here, then he was pretty much golden. There was no way that Solstice could circumvent those because he was just completely trapped in there because the shock charges, the only thing you can do is basically let those drain themselves of either energy or time until they're gone. Trumpet trying to capitalize on the fact that he just won a big engagement. He still has these Teslas, so if he can use those to zone in an offensive engagement, he should be able to push back an army like this, which is mostly Xayidlings. Plus 3 upgrades coming out from Solstice. We'll see if those will be able to succeed. The Xayidlings, though, running in, using the dash, just getting absolutely torn up by the shock balls. We have a GG called by Trumpet. And honestly, the big turn there were 2 things that happened there. It happened so fast. Let's just, as we wrap up this video, what happened is he rolled right over the acid mines, or whatever they're called, and then was effectively sitting in the acid clouds that they left. Meanwhile, he did lay down his shock orbs. The issue was that the Xayidlings utilized that dash ability to get out of them as fast as possible and just get right on top of Trumpet's army that was already weakened. So that was a big gamble by Solstice, thinking that being able to eye this amount of Xayid links and saying, I think this is enough to take down his army, as long as I don't stand in the shock orbs, dashed right past, right on top of Trumpet's army, was able to pretty much obliterate it instantly. Huge supply gap there, Trumpet deciding to call GG. All right, cool game. Hope you enjoyed this one. And we'll see. I encourage anyone who's playing like custom melee maps like this, if you have a particularly cool game in general, please send it to me, especially ones that are very back and forth like this one. Very hard to tell who's going to win. Both players really at each other's throats the whole time. Or if you have one that just gets to, that's interesting and there's some aggression, but also may get to like a tier 3 section of the game. Stuff like this, it's hard to keep track of everything, right? Because everything is different. Both races have hugely different mechanics. I do feel that they're quite balanced with each other and also the vanilla 3 races, so it'd be cool to see some of these races versus the vanilla races as well. I did cast some tournaments of this a while ago. I think those are still ongoing. It's just it's hard for me to keep up with the tournaments. They do last pretty much the whole day when they happen, but I'd certainly be happy to check one or two of those out in the future again as well. But this was a cool map. I appreciate Solstice for sending this to me, and again, I encourage anyone else who's playing Scion Custom Races or really any custom races, if any are really out there that are well made, to send me any maps, replays rather, that look like fun games. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye now.